My name is Margaret. I'm 60 years old, and what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. Just 3 days ago, my son Adrian and my daughter in law Clara conspired to harm my eldest son Nathan in a car accident. One morning, like any other morning, I stood by the window, the sunlight gently filtering through the frosted glass of the wooden house that my family had lived in for so many years. The faint golden rays lit up the objects in the house, making them shine softly, as if each item had its own story. A story that only those who truly understand can feel. Gabriel always said that home is where we find our stability, where we find peace. But in recent days, this house no longer seems to give me that sense of comfort. I looked at the garden that we had nurtured together. The trees had lost their green color, and now, golden leaves fell to the ground, signaling not only the arrival of autumn, but also marking traces of the past. Each falling leaf carried a memory, a piece of what once was. My family had once lived in golden years, which seemed eternal, but now I realize they were just fleeting moments, moments that I can no longer hold on to. Gabriel, the man I had spent my whole life loving, he was a skilled carpenter, a strong man, few words, but always diligent in his work, always protecting the family with small but loving actions. He was the solid foundation of this family. Every time I watched him work, I would think back to the early days when we were newly married. He built me a beautiful home, from stiff, dry planks into tables, chairs, and other furniture. Gabriel was not a man to express his emotions with words, but I always knew that the love he had for me and for the family was unconditional. Yet now, standing before him, I feel a sense of estrangement, an invisible distance I cannot cross. Gabriel is no longer the man I once loved, and there is nothing I can do to change that. Nathan, our eldest son, was someone everyone was proud of. He was smart, strong, and talented. Even as a child, Nathan always had ideas and plans for the future. I remember the days when he would come home with stories of his successes at work, of the achievements he had made. Nathan always made me proud, but over time, I realized that no matter how successful he became, he always kept his distance from me. Sometimes, I feel like I am looking at him from afar, unable to get close. Every time I try to ask about his life, he turns away, as if not wanting to share. Nathan's confidence, his independence, made me feel that I was no longer the mother he needed. What did I do wrong? I couldn't keep him by my side. I couldn't bridge the distance between us. And then, Adrian, my youngest son, was a different story. He was the child I always felt I had to protect, to care for. Adrian was an artist, always living in his own world, where emotions and creativity dominated. He was always dreaming, and, perhaps because of that, I sometimes felt worried about his future. Adrian was not like Nathan, not as confident and strong as his older brother. He always lived with his own emotions, his anxieties, and insecurities. I could feel that clearly, but I didn't know how to help. Adrian was someone I could never fully understand. He always felt like he wasn't good enough, not strong like Nathan, and I couldn't do anything to erase that feeling. When sitting in the house, I could see the far-off look in his eyes as he stared out the window, as if searching for something, but unable to find it. Then there was Clara, Adrian's wife, a woman I couldn't quite figure out. She was beautiful, smart, and very capable. The first time I met her, I noticed an eloquence in the way she spoke. But there was also something that made me uneasy. Clara had a very subtle way of behaving, sometimes overly subtle. She knew how to draw people into her world, but I felt there was some calculation behind it. She was not an easy woman, and I couldn't fully understand what she was thinking. While Adrian lived with his deep emotions, Clara lived with her intellect, and I always feared that she would control Adrian's life in a way I could not. The years of my family seemed to be gone now, and I realized that the signs of change had appeared long ago. The cracks were not large gaps that I could see immediately, but small, subtle fissures that slowly spread. I hadn't noticed them, or perhaps I had been too preoccupied with preserving the seemingly eternal happiness. Everything had begun to change, but I didn't want to believe it. Why hadn't I noticed? Why hadn't I seen those cracks when they were just beginning? When Nathan died, everything changed forever. His death was an unimaginable shock. No one in my family was prepared for such a tragedy. We were still young, with a future ahead of us, but it all vanished in the blink of an eye. Since then, I no longer feel the stability in my family. All that remains is the pain and the emptiness that I cannot fill. I try to continue living, trying to care for Adrian, trying to care for Gabriel, but I know that nothing can replace Nathan. Nothing can fill the void he left behind. After Nathan's death, Adrian changed. He became too kind. Every time I saw Adrian, I felt the insincerity in his actions. He became overly considerate, overly thoughtful, but I sensed a coldness in those actions. He was not the person I raised, and I couldn't help but feel concerned. Something was wrong. That feeling had been rising in me for a long time, but I couldn't explain it. Now, standing before this house, looking at the family I once loved, I can't help but feel that everything has cracked. These cracks are not easy to see, but I know they are smoldering, waiting to burst forth. All I can do now is try to heal them, knowing that it won't be easy. Nathan's death turned everything upside down. That sudden news hit like a powerful wave, crashing against the shore, shattering everything I once believed in. The air in the house grew eerily silent, as if that silence was wearing away the last moments of our family. Everything suddenly became blurry, and I couldn't tell what was real and what was a dream. I stood there, my hand trembling, as I held the phone through which we received the police notification, staring at the cold, impersonal words. Nathan passed away in a car accident? I truly couldn't believe what I had just heard. Even though we had received confirmation from the police, a part of me still couldn't accept it. Nathan, my confident, strong, and energetic son, how could he have left so suddenly? Time seemed to stop, and everything around me blurred, no longer clear. I had to ask the officer 3 times, "Are you sure?" But I only received the cold, final response. "Yes, ma'am, Nathan is gone." I turned and looked at Gabriel, the man I had lived with for so many years. He said nothing, just stood there, his eyes vacant, as if he couldn't process the truth. Gabriel had always been the strong one, but now he seemed like someone else, a shadow, unable to face reality. I wanted to say something, to comfort him, but I knew I couldn't. I too was drowning in confusion, in a moment where no words could heal this pain. There were no comforting words that could ease this loss. We stood there, in the quiet room, in a family that had once been full of laughter, but now only silence remained. After the police left, Gabriel sat down in a chair, his eyes still distant, unable to believe what had just happened. I could see the exhaustion, the disappointment in every line of his face. He didn't cry, didn't say anything, just remained silent. And I felt like there was nothing I could do but stand there, watching him. Why was he silent? That silence was like an invisible wall pushing us further apart. Gabriel, are you okay? I asked, my voice trembling with concern. Gabriel looked at me, but didn't say anything. His eyes were empty, as if he no longer recognized me. I couldn't save Nathan, he said, his voice choking. I couldn't protect this family anymore, Margaret. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I had thought that together, we could overcome anything. But now, everything had changed. Gabriel was no longer the strong man I once knew. He was no longer the protector of our family. He was just a man silently enduring his own pain. I stood there, looking at Gabriel, feeling as though I was looking at a stranger. Why wouldn't he say anything? Why was he keeping silent? Silence wasn't the solution. I knew that. But right now, I didn't know how to pull him out of this pit of surrender. I sat down beside him, gently taking his hand. Gabriel, I know you're in pain, but I can't bear this silence anymore. Our family needs to face the truth. If we don't, everything will just get worse. Gabriel said nothing. He just looked at my hand, his expression still dark. Every second stretched on like eternity, and I could feel the stillness, the deadlock in the air. But I knew that if we didn't face what had happened, we would never heal. Even Adrian, my youngest son, was no longer the child I once knew. He had always been sensitive, but since Nathan's death, Adrian had become stranger. He didn't cry, didn't show the sorrow I expected. Instead, he acted like someone too concerned, too kind. Every time I looked at him, I sensed insincerity in his actions. His gaze, full of worry but overly concerned, made me feel an anxiety I couldn't explain. I didn't know if he was hiding his true feelings, or was he trying to force himself to compensate for this loss? Adrian, are you okay? I asked when I saw him staring at me with worried eyes. He didn't answer right away. After a moment, Adrian spoke. Mom, I don't know what to do anymore. I can't handle Nathan's death. I can't. I looked at my son, feeling a deep pity. Adrian had always been the child I worried about the most, but now I saw him as lost. He didn't know how to cope with his pain, and I didn't know how to help him. You don't need to force yourself like this, Adrian, I said softly. I understand. You're in pain. But you have to know that we can't continue living in this silence. Don't hide your feelings anymore. You have to face them. Adrian looked at me, his eyes filled with helplessness. He didn't say anything, just lowered his head. And I knew he couldn't keep up this facade forever. But could anyone in my family truly face the truth? Now, my whole family had turned into a silent storm. Part of me felt like everything was falling apart, but I couldn't speak it out. Another part of me knew what I had to do to keep this family from falling into a state of irreparable ruin. Since Nathan's death, everything changed so quickly, and I couldn't accept that change easily. The cracks that I couldn't immediately see had appeared and spread through my family, and now I had to face them all. But could my family continue after everything that had happened? Weeks passed since Nathan's death, and every morning when I woke up, I still couldn't escape the feeling that I was living in a nightmare. Everything in the house seemed to remain intact, but the emptiness inside me was something I couldn't fill. Gabriel still kept silent, saying nothing, offering no explanations. The heavy silence hung over the house. I knew he was suffering, but his pain only made everything more complicated. Adrian, my youngest son, was no better. He had become too kind, to the point where it made me uneasy. Every time I looked into his eyes, I felt like something wasn't right. Adrian had never been one to easily express his emotions, but this time, I felt like he was doing everything he could to prevent me from worrying. He helped me with housework, went shopping, and always tried to comfort me. But I felt that these actions didn't come from genuine affection. Perhaps, deep down, I realized that Adrian's kindness was just a facade, a way to hide the pain or even the guilt he was carrying. And I couldn't help but wonder, was Adrian hiding something? In the past few days, I had tried to avoid thinking about what was happening to my family. But one morning, while cleaning Adrian's study, I happened upon some strange financial documents. I don't know why I opened those drawers, but a strong urge compelled me to search through everything. There were several large transactions I had never known about, and several unclear companies Adrian had dealt with. It felt like I was seeing a side of my son that I had never known, a dark side I couldn't comprehend. Why would Adrian do these things? Was he falling into a world I couldn't reach? Those questions swirled in my mind, and I felt anxiety rising. My heart was in turmoil, but I couldn't stop thinking about the events that had unfolded. Why had Adrian done these things? Why had he transferred large sums of money to shady companies? And was there any connection between these financial transactions and Nathan's death? Everything couldn't be as simple as I thought. And I couldn't live in this uncertainty. I couldn't let everything pass without knowing the truth. If Nathan died for a reason I didn't understand, I had to get to the bottom of it. I couldn't just stand there and watch. I couldn't believe what I had discovered, but the urge to uncover the truth was undeniable. I had to tell Gabriel what I had found. No matter how silent he was, no matter how much he tried to avoid the truth, I had to tell him. I couldn't let things continue like this. We had lost one child, and I couldn't lose another, especially not my husband. But when I thought about facing Gabriel, I wasn't sure what kind of reaction I would get. He had been this way already. It wouldn't be easy to confront the truth. When I entered Gabriel's room, he was sitting quietly, his eyes focused on the wooden planks he was working on. Each hammer strike echoed in the quiet space, like the steady beat of a heart trying to maintain its rhythm. He didn't look at me, didn't say anything, just continued with his work. Every time I looked at him, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. Gabriel was no longer the man I once loved, but I couldn't let this silence continue anymore. "Gabriel, we need to talk," I began, my voice betraying my unease. "You know, don't you? Adrian's transactions. Did you see anything?" Gabriel looked up, his gaze cold and tired. "Did you find something?" he asked without surprise, as if he knew I would uncover everything sooner or later. But then he looked down again, his eyes empty. "Margaret, don't do this. I don't want to hear about this." I couldn't understand. His silence, his refusal to face the truth, only made me feel worse. "You can't keep avoiding this, Gabriel. If we don't face the truth, this family will never heal. Adrian can't keep hiding everything." Gabriel didn't respond immediately. He stood up and walked outside. He stood there, looking out at the garden we had taken care of together for so many years. Our roof, the things we had made with our own hands. Everything was the result of years of hard work. But now, they no longer held warmth. I saw him sigh, his gaze deep in thought, as if reflecting on the years that had passed and unable to accept the changes. Finally, Gabriel turned back to me. "I've known everything," he said, his voice hoarse, as if he was finally letting out everything he had been keeping inside. I knew about those transactions, but I didn't want to face it. I was afraid that if I spoke about it, we would lose everything. I didn't want to lose both of our children. Gabriel's words made my heart ache. He had known. He had witnessed everything. But out of fear, he had chosen silence. "You're afraid of losing both of our children?" I repeated his words, my heart aching. "You didn't just lose Nathan, Gabriel. You've made me lose my faith in you." And in that moment, I understood. Gabriel couldn't do anything but stay silent. He was afraid of losing everything, but didn't realize that it was that silence that had killed our family. "We can't keep living like this, Gabriel. I can't stay silent forever. Nathan's death can't be in vain. You have to help me, help our family. We need to face the truth." Gabriel looked at me for a long time, then finally nodded. A subtle shift, but I knew he had made up his mind. He couldn't live in avoidance anymore. We had to face what had happened. "What do we do next?" Gabriel asked, his voice tired, but also somewhat determined. I didn't answer immediately. I just looked into his eyes, and I knew that no matter what, this family would have to start over from here. We couldn't continue living in this sorrow. We would find peace again. If we had to face what had passed, we would. And I couldn't wait any longer. Nathan's death blew away all the peace in my family. It wasn't just a simple death, but a shock that shattered the final pieces of my life. Everything I had trusted, everything I thought I could control, now seemed meaningless. The loss of Nathan was a wound that could never heal. But what hurt even more was that I discovered the people I loved the most were the ones I could no longer trust. Gabriel and Adrian, the two men in my life. Both had secrets I never imagined I would have to face. Gabriel chose silence. He witnessed Nathan's death, but he couldn't make a decision. He saw Adrian push Nathan, saw the moment when he made his brother fall. But he did nothing. He didn't intervene. Gabriel, the man I had always considered the pillar of the family, had now become a stranger in my eyes. He didn't just stay silent, but his silence killed a part of our family. I couldn't stay calm anymore. I couldn't sit still and watch my family drown in darkness. I needed to know the truth. I had to face a truth I never thought I would encounter. I began searching, though I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I couldn't continue living in uncertainty. Gabriel remained silent, not answering my questions. He couldn't explain the things I had discovered. He couldn't explain why he had witnessed everything and done nothing. And I couldn't stop thinking about Adrian. He had changed so much since Nathan's death. I didn't recognize my youngest son anymore. Adrian's kind words no longer came from sincere affection, but from a sense of guilt he couldn't express. He always tried to make me happy, tried to help me overcome the pain. But I sensed insincerity in every action. That strangeness kept me awake at night, unable to feel at ease when looking at him. Was he hiding something? Did he feel guilty? Or was he shouldering something I didn't know about? In the days after Nathan's death, I couldn't stop those thoughts. The anxiety in my heart grew bigger. One day, when Adrian wasn't around, I decided to search his room. I didn't know why I was doing it, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong, that Adrian was no longer my son. While searching, I discovered strange financial documents. Large sums of money had been transferred to accounts I had never seen, and there were transactions I couldn't explain. Some money was transferred to companies I had never heard of. A part of me felt dizzy. What I found wasn't just a sign of something shady, but proof of a change in my son that I had never noticed. The documents not only confused me, but also made me ask, was Adrian involved in Nathan's death? Was he hiding something that couldn't be spoken? The bank accounts, the transfers, and the shady transactions left me bewildered. How could a child I had raised, taught, fall into such a world? Was he being forced into a life I couldn't see? Or were these the consequences of choices I hadn't noticed? The questions kept spinning in my mind, and I couldn't ignore them. I had to tell Gabriel what I had found. Even though he didn't want to face the truth, even though he didn't want to make everything worse, I couldn't continue living in this uncertainty. I needed to get to the bottom of things, no matter how painful the truth was. The next morning, I decided I had to talk to Gabriel. We couldn't continue living in silence. This family needed to face the truth. And if we did nothing, we would lose everything. Gabriel, I started, my voice calm but resolute. I found these documents. What has Adrian been doing? Do you know? Gabriel looked up, but he didn't meet my eyes. He looked out the window, where the sunlight was slowly fading, as if he wanted to avoid everything. I don't know anything about those transactions, Margaret, he replied, his voice soft but full of weariness. I couldn't do anything to stop it. I've seen the signs for a long time. But I didn't dare say anything. I felt my heart grow heavy. I had once thought Gabriel was the one person I could trust, but now I wasn't sure of that anymore. He had known about the problems in our family, but had done nothing to prevent them. Gabriel, you can't keep silent like this. Our son caused Nathan's death. We need to face the truth, no matter how painful it is. Gabriel turned back to look at me, his eyes still full of helplessness. I saw Adrian push Nathan that night, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't dare say anything. I was afraid of losing both of our children. Gabriel's words made my heart twist. It was too late to do anything else, and I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The wounds in this family couldn't be healed easily, but I knew that if we didn't face the truth, we would never move forward. My family would remain trapped in darkness, never escaping the lies and suffering. We can't continue like this anymore, I said, my voice more determined. We need to find out the truth, face it. Gabriel stood up, left his seat, and walked toward the door. He said nothing, just silently walked away. I stood there, watching his figure, feeling an immense sadness. I had once thought my family would always be strong, but now everything had shattered in silence. I decided I had to act. I couldn't keep living in this pain, and I couldn't let these confessions become a burden. Gabriel had admitted the truth, and I couldn't let this truth kill my family again. I had to find the answers to all the unanswered questions. I couldn't let fear continue to hold us back. From the moment I realized that my family was falling into an irreparable state, I knew I couldn't just sit back and watch everything crumble. Yes, I had lost Nathan, but I couldn't lose anyone else. Gabriel and Adrian, the people I loved most, now made me feel like strangers. All that was left was confusion. secrets that could no longer be hidden, and the pain in my heart. I couldn't continue living in this lie. I had to find the truth, no matter what price I had to pay. Although I had a tense conversation with Gabriel, his silence still enveloped this house. He said nothing about Nathan's death, didn't explain what had happened, and didn't answer the questions I asked about Adrian. Gabriel not only lost his eldest son, but he also lost himself in the immense pain. But I couldn't just ignore the strange signs I had discovered. We had to face the truth, and I could no longer endure this silence. One of the things that made it impossible for me to stop thinking was Adrian's change. The son I once knew had become strange and entirely different. He had become overly considerate, overly attentive, to the point where I felt like he was acting a role rather than expressing his true feelings. There was nothing natural in the way Adrian treated me. It was a false facade that couldn't be hidden. His gestures of kindness, his soft words, didn't come from genuine affection, but from the guilt he was carrying. He wasn't the son I knew. And then, while I was still trying to find answers, Clara, Adrian's wife, called me. She spoke softly, as if trying to convince me of something. I didn't know what to say, but when I heard her ask for financial help, I couldn't help but feel the exploitation in her words. Clara never mentioned Nathan, didn't express any sympathy or sorrow, but instead focused solely on money, on what she and Adrian needed. Margaret, I know you and your family are going through a tough time, but I think you understand. We need financial help. Adrian and I have been facing many difficulties, and we can't continue like this. You know, our situation is very hard. If you could assist us a little, we would be very grateful, Clara said sweetly, but it wasn't hard to detect the calculating tone in her words. A chill ran through me. I had once thought Clara was sophisticated and clever, but now I realized she wasn't the person I had imagined. She didn't care about the pain my family was enduring. She only cared about exploiting Nathan's death to achieve her goals. She wasn't just a woman in need of help, but someone calculating every move to benefit from my family's situation. I stayed silent for a moment, trying to suppress my growing anger. Clara, I don't know what to say. My family is dealing with an immense loss, and I can't continue helping you at this time, I replied, my voice firm, no longer accommodating as before. But Clara didn't give up. She continued to persuade me with even sweeter words. Margaret, you and I have had a long relationship, and I believe you understand us. Without your help, we won't be able to get through this. Your son, Adrian, needs support to stabilize his life. He can't continue living in these circumstances. Her words made me even more worried. She didn't show a shred of sympathy for Nathan's death. Instead, she was solely focused on money. The audacity in her voice made me shiver. I couldn't let her exploit Nathan's death for her own benefit. No way. Clara, I said, my voice more resolute. My family is struggling with this loss. I can't continue helping you at this time. I have nothing to offer you. I couldn't help but feel frustrated. Clara's persuasion made me angry, but I couldn't do anything else but end the conversation. Everything had crossed the line I could no longer accept. Clara was no longer a friend, a relative, but a predator, trying to exploit my family's situation to meet her own needs. After the phone call with Clara, I realized I had to take action. I couldn't let her take advantage of my family anymore. I decided to see a lawyer. I needed legal advice, needed help to protect the family's assets, and to understand what was really going on. Gabriel couldn't help me. Adrian was living in deception. And now, I couldn't continue living in silence. When I met the lawyer, I felt like I was facing a harsh truth. He helped me see more clearly the financial situation of the family and the legal risks we might face if we didn't act in time. Things weren't easy. What I had discovered was just the tip of the iceberg. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but I knew that if I didn't do something, my family would lose everything. The lawyer helped me start gathering the necessary evidence to bring everything to light. I couldn't just sit there and wait. If there was something I could do to save my family, I would do it. Even if I had to face painful truths, I wouldn't stop. When I returned home, I found Gabriel sitting silently in the workshop. He was working, but I realized that he wasn't truly focused. What had happened had shattered everything, and I couldn't go back anymore. His silence couldn't save this family. I needed him, but I couldn't continue living in this fog. Everything had become clear. On a rainy morning, as the cold rain seeped through the narrow window cracks of the house, I decided that it was time for a serious conversation with Adrian. Time had passed, and I could no longer live in uncertainty. I couldn't let the lies continue to destroy my family. Gabriel still said nothing, and Adrian kept avoiding me, making me feel like something was eating him from the inside. But I could not wait any longer. Nathan's death could not be in vain. I couldn't continue living in this silence. The days after Nathan's death felt like my family had been abandoned in a pile of rubble, buried in silence and lies. Gabriel, the one I loved, couldn't face the truth. He chose silence. He chose to turn a blind eye to the signs I had begun to notice. Gabriel's silence was like a thick wall, and I knew it was only driving the family further apart. I couldn't sit still in this situation anymore. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. Adrian, my youngest son, seemed trapped in an emotional spiral. He was no longer the son I once knew. Adrian's actions, his over-the-top care, his overly sincere words, everything felt fake, unnatural. He didn't express his emotions, but every time I looked into his eyes, I saw worry and guilt weighing heavily on his heart. I knew there was something he couldn't speak, a pain he was trying to hide. That made me even more anxious. So, I decided to have a private conversation with Adrian. He had to face the truth. We couldn't continue living in this haze while one of our own family members was hiding something important. I couldn't stop thinking about Nathan's death, and I knew that if I didn't help Adrian face his guilt, our family wouldn't heal. That day, while Gabriel was still working in the workshop, I found Adrian in the living room. He was sitting in the old armchair, the dim light casting shadows on his face, highlighting the cracks in his soul. The raindrops falling outside the window added to the stillness in the room. Adrian didn't say anything when I walked in, just looked at me with tired eyes. He didn't appear worried, but I knew deep down he was carrying a pain too great to express. "Adrian," I started, my voice gentle yet firm. "We need to talk. You can't continue living in this silence. I can't watch you live like this, in this haze." Adrian didn't answer right away. He sat still, his gaze lost in his own thoughts, as if unsure where to begin. I looked at his hands, fingers tightly clasped together, a sign of tension and anxiety. "You know that you've changed, right?" I said, my voice warm but resolute. "I know you're hiding something. I can't keep living in this uncertainty, Adrian. You have to face what you've done." Adrian finally looked up, his eyes full of confusion and guilt. "Mom, I can't change what happened," he said, his voice choking. "I can't change Nathan's death. I hurt him, and I can't forgive myself." Adrian's words felt like a knife stabbing my heart. The son I loved, the one I had raised since he was little, was now admitting that he had caused his brother's death. The guilt in Adrian was undeniable, but I couldn't let my son drown in it forever. He needed to understand that, no matter how painful, facing the truth would set him free. "Adrian," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "you can't live in this guilt forever. Regret doesn't always fix the past, but if you face it, you will find a way out. I can't change the past, but you can change your future." Adrian lowered his head, his eyes red. He didn't cry, but I could feel the turmoil inside him. "Mom, I don't know what to do," Adrian said, his voice almost choking. "I can't bear this guilt. You won't forgive me, will you?" I couldn't accept the thought that Adrian believed he wouldn't be forgiven. My heart ached as I saw my son in this state. "Adrian," I said softly, placing my hand on his shoulder, "I will always love you, but you must face the truth. Take responsibility for your actions. I can help you, but you must find a way to heal." Adrian stayed silent for a long time. Then, finally, he looked up at me. He didn't say anything, but tears silently streamed down his cheeks. But this time, it wasn't regret. It was a glimmer of hope, a light in the darkness he had been living in. Finally, he spoke, his voice trembling. "Mom, I'll try. I won't let this pain haunt me forever. I'll face the truth." I held his hand tightly, feeling the change in his gaze. This was the first step for Adrian to overcome his guilt. He couldn't change the past, but he could change his future. And I, as a mother, would always be by his side. But this story doesn't end here. Clara, Adrian's wife, kept pushing forward, showing no intention of stopping. After my conversation with Adrian, I felt an increasing sense of worry. Clara was not someone I could easily ignore. The relationship between us had changed too much. I knew she was no longer just Adrian's wife. Clara was a manipulator, someone always looking for ways to exploit this situation. She showed no remorse for Nathan's death. Instead, she only cared about what benefits she could gain from my family. I couldn't let Clara continue exploiting my family. Every time she got close to me, I felt like I was facing a predator looking for a way to strike. I knew I had to act to protect my family. No matter what, I wouldn't let her destroy what was left. That night, I decided to see a lawyer. I couldn't let Clara and Adrian continue manipulating my family. I needed legal advice, help to protect the family's assets and honor, and to understand what was really happening. This family couldn't fall into the hands of those who would exploit it. And I, with all the strength and love of a mother, would protect what was left. After days of listening to Gabriel and Adrian's confessions, I felt like I was standing at a crossroads in my life. Everything in my family had changed too quickly, and I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The secrets, the silence, and the emotions I never thought I would have to face forced me to reconsider everything. My family, a family I had always trusted, was now a pile of rubble I couldn't easily mend. Every day was a battle within myself, between love and the truth. I couldn't forget Gabriel's gaze when he confessed that he had heard the argument between Adrian and Nathan that night. Gabriel's words echoed in my head, preventing me from continuing to live in this uncertainty. "I saw Adrian push Nathan," Gabriel had said. but I didn't dare do anything. I was afraid of losing both of my sons. Those words struck like a sharp knife, piercing my heart. Gabriel didn't just fail to protect the family, but he also made me face this harsh truth. Nathan's death wasn't a simple accident. It was the result of the anger and hatred Adrian couldn't control. Facing this truth hurt, but I couldn't continue living in these lies and silence. The day after Nathan's death, I went to Nathan's grave. I prayed for him, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Why did everything have to end this way? Why had my family fallen into this tragedy? I had once thought I could protect my family from all the bad things. But now, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a deep hole, not knowing how to escape. As I stood there, looking at Nathan's gravestone, I felt an endless sorrow. Losing a child is the worst thing a mother can experience. But what could be worse? Perhaps it was the truth behind his death. My family hadn't just lost Nathan. We had also lost the values we once trusted, the values of love, honesty, and mutual protection. But now, everything had shattered. And in that shattering, I realized I couldn't just sit back and let this suffering consume my family. When I returned home, I decided to take action. My family had been destroyed by silence and secrets. I couldn't continue living in this haze. I needed to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. Adrian had to take responsibility for his actions, and I wouldn't let him continue hiding this guilt. But the big question was, how could my family continue to live after all these secrets were exposed? The answer wasn't easy. I knew that bringing the truth to light would cause a lot of harm, but if I didn't, my family would never heal. I had to find a way for Adrian to face what he had done. And I had to face myself, too. The truth couldn't be changed, but confronting it could help us find each other again. The next day, I decided to talk to Adrian once more. He had admitted part of his guilt, but I knew that wasn't enough. He still hadn't fully faced the truth. Nathan's death couldn't just be an accident, and I couldn't let Adrian continue living in this lie. I didn't know what would happen when I faced him, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. When I entered Adrian's room, he was sitting in the corner, his eyes full of exhaustion. He looked at me, but didn't say anything. We both remained silent for a few seconds. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, and the silence was so thick I could hear my own breathing. "Adrian," I began, my voice still gentle but full of resolve. "You have to face the truth. I've seen what you've done, and I can't continue living in this lie. You have to take responsibility for your actions." Adrian looked up at me, his eyes full of conflict. "Mom, I don't know what to do anymore. I can't go back. I hurt Nathan, and I can't forgive myself." The guilt in his voice made my heart ache. He wasn't just carrying the pain of losing his brother. He was also bearing a terrible burden of his own making. "Adrian, you can't live in this guilt forever," I said, my voice firm. "I can't change the past, but you can change your future. You have to face the truth." Adrian didn't respond immediately. He just lowered his head, his hands tightly clenched as if trying to hold back his emotions. But I knew he was fighting with himself. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes full of pain. "Mom, I can't forgive myself. I killed him." Adrian's words were like a slap in the face. Everything I had thought about him, the expectations I had placed on him, now seemed meaningless. But I knew that, no matter how guilty he felt, what mattered was that he had to face the truth and take responsibility. That was the only way he could move forward. "You didn't kill him, Adrian," I said, my voice firm. "You made a terrible mistake, but I believe you can change. You can find a way to make up for this, and I will be by your side through it all." Adrian sat in silence, not saying a word. He didn't cry, but I saw the inner turmoil in his eyes. After a long moment, Adrian stood up, said nothing, and walked out into the yard. I stayed in the room, feeling empty and exhausted. The guilt still clung to him, but I knew he couldn't live in this pain forever. We couldn't let our family drown in guilt and silence. As I looked out the window, I realized that no matter how painful the truth was, I had to stand up. I couldn't let Clara continue manipulating my family. The thoughts of protecting my family, of ensuring our survival, made me even more determined. I needed to find a way to protect what was left, even if the cost was high. A week after I confronted Adrian and asked him to face the truth, I felt like a violent wave was crashing down on my family. Although I knew that confronting the truth would help us deal with the pain, it also opened up new wounds, pains I had never expected. Gabriel, after everything that had happened, still lived in emotional paralysis. And Adrian, despite having admitted his mistake, still couldn't move past the guilt that weighed heavily on his heart. Both were lost in their own thoughts, and I was the only one standing between them, trying to piece the fragments of this family back together. I didn't know what to do. In the past days, I had been thinking about everything that had happened, about Nathan's death and the dark events surrounding it. I felt like I was standing at the edge, unable to look back at the past, yet unable to move forward. But I knew one thing. I couldn't continue living in this darkness. I couldn't let my family continue to fall apart because of silence, lies, and guilt. The only thing I could do was keep fighting, no matter how painful it was. But then, one day, everything suddenly changed. Adrian came to see me that afternoon. He didn't give any warning, just appeared at the door of my room, his eyes full of worry and guilt. He didn't say anything, just stood there, as if waiting for me to say something. I looked at him, sensing the pain he was carrying in his heart, and I knew, no matter how bad things had become, I had to face him. He was my son, and a mother's love couldn't be changed by any guilt. "Come in, Adrian," I said, my voice gentle, but with a quiet determination. "We need to talk." Adrian entered the room, closed the door behind him, and sat down across from me. He looked at me for a moment, then finally spoke. "Mom, I know I can't change what happened, but I want you to know that I don't regret telling the truth. I can't continue living in this lie, but I feel like I can't make up for this mistake." His voice was choked, as if each word was a blow to his mind. I couldn't just say that everything would be okay, because I knew nothing was okay right now. My whole family had been hurt, and only facing the truth could help us find peace. "You can't fix the past," I said, my voice gentle but resolute. "But you can fix your future, and I will always be here, by your side, when you're ready to face the truth." Adrian didn't answer right away. He sat silently, looking down at his hands, as if searching for an answer he couldn't find. I knew he was still wrestling within himself. What he had done couldn't be forgiven easily, but at least he had the courage to admit it and face it. This courage was what I needed from him, and it was the only way this family could begin again. Finally, Adrian stood up and walked over to me. Mom, he said, his voice choked, I don't know how to make up for this mistake, but I want to do everything I can to show you that I love you, and I will do anything to not disappoint you again. I looked at him, my heart tightening. In Adrian's eyes, I saw the suffering, the remorse, but also a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the moment he would truly change. My family's story wasn't over. We could heal everything if we faced the truth and loved each other. You will make it, Adrian, I said, my voice firmer than ever. You will have to take responsibility for what you've done, but I won't let you lose your way. Our family will not fall apart. I believe you can overcome all of this. Adrian looked at me one more time, his eyes shining, and I saw a new confidence in that gaze. He was no longer a weak child, but a man ready to face what he had done. I knew that, even though there was a long road ahead. At least he was ready to walk it with me. The hug between Adrian and I was an unforgettable moment. I held him tightly, and I knew that we would never let go of each other. Although we couldn't change the past, we could renew our future. When Adrian walked out of the room, I felt a sense of relief. But at the same time, I knew the story wasn't over. Clara, she was still waiting for the chance to exploit my family's suffering. I couldn't let her continue doing that. I would have to face Clara, no matter how dangerous she was. A few days later, Clara called me again. Her voice was still gentle, but this time, I no longer allowed myself to be deceived. She was trying to soften me, trying to convince me that she needed help, but I no longer trusted her. Margaret, Clara said, I know you're in a difficult situation, but I think we can solve this together. If you could help me a little, I would be very grateful. Her voice was sweet, but in my eyes, I saw the deceit. Clara, I interrupted, my voice strong, I can't help you anymore. My family has suffered enough because of you. You can't exploit us any longer. She stayed silent for a moment, then sneered. But I couldn't hear sincerity in that laugh. You don't understand anything, she said, her voice turning challenging. You'll regret this. After that phone call, I felt like I had won a battle. I couldn't let Clara continue manipulating my family. What she had done was unforgivable, and I wouldn't allow her to exploit those I loved. It was time for me to protect my family. The next steps wouldn't be easy. We would have to face great difficulties. But at least my family had started again from here. Adrian had decided to face the truth, and I had made up my mind to protect what was left. Now, I believed that, no matter how many obstacles we faced, we would find each other again. I had once believed that my family was a solid world, unbreakable. We had faced so many hardships, but we always stood together. But now, with Nathan gone and everything in this family slowly falling apart, I realized that not everything can remain steadfast. My family, no matter how many years we've been bonded, is not immune to collapse if there is no love, truth, and acceptance. And I, Margaret, a mother, now stand amidst all the broken pieces, trying to find what was lost. Every day when I look at Gabriel and Adrian, I feel a new pain. Gabriel still says nothing about Nathan's death, about his silence throughout the days that have passed. He hasn't faced the truth, hasn't acknowledged what happened. He, the one I loved and thought would always be by my side, has now become a shadow in this house. And Adrian, though he has admitted his mistakes, still can't escape the guilt he carries within. He still avoids me, as if he cannot face himself. But one thing I know for sure is that I cannot continue living like this. Silence cannot heal my family, This uncertainty cannot last forever. If we do not face the truth, if we do not find a way to heal the wounds, we will never be able to live as a family again. That is why I have decided to act. I cannot let Nathan's loss become the reason for us to live forever in disappointment and pain. I had looked at Gabriel and said that we needed to face the truth. But it was hard to begin because his silence was too strong. I could feel the pain in his eyes, but he couldn't open up to me. Gabriel was probably too afraid to face the truth. He was afraid that if he did, he would lose everything. But if we do not face it, this family will never heal. Healing cannot come from gentle words alone. It must come through actions, through our determination to change. As for Adrian, he too was living in inner conflict. After Nathan's death, I had seen a change in him. Not only remorse, but also a deep reflection I had never seen before. He was no longer the carefree child. He had matured through the pain he carried in his heart. But the price Adrian had to pay was too high. Nathan's death was a clear sign that he still couldn't face himself. And I, as a mother, could not stand idly by while my son drowned in torment. A few days later, as I was preparing dinner, Adrian came close to me and sat down at the table. He didn't say anything, just silently looked at me. I sensed the exhaustion in him, but I also saw the effort. He was no longer hiding. He had come to terms with the pain he had caused himself and this family. "Mom, I don't know what to do," he said, his voice choked. "I can't go back and fix everything, but I won't let you down anymore." His words were like a light in the darkness. I didn't think Adrian could admit that, but he did. He had realized that, no matter how much pain it caused, he had to face the truth. And that was the first step he needed to take to move beyond his guilt. "You can't change the past, Adrian," I said, my voice firm, "but you can change your future. I know you're in pain. I know you can't forgive yourself. But I will be here, helping you through it all. We will start again, but you must face the truth." Adrian looked at me, his eyes now showing a determination I had never seen before. "I will do everything to make up for this mistake, Mom," he said, his voice full of resolve. "I won't give up." At that moment, I knew that there was still hope for my family. Not hope for perfection or the return of the past, but hope in change. Hope that, no matter how much we have to go through, we would still be a family. The important thing was facing the truth, no matter how painful it might be. After my conversation with Adrian, I felt a sense of peace in my heart. Although the truth was still a wound that hadn't healed, I saw a glimmer of light. That light came from Adrian, from his determination to face himself, from his willingness to change so he wouldn't repeat his mistakes. But the important thing was, I wasn't doing this alone. Gabriel, though still silent, was beginning to face the truth in his own way. He couldn't go back to the past, but he could begin anew from now. As for Clara, I knew she wouldn't stop. She wasn't going to easily give up on my family. She was always looking for a way to push forward, trying to profit from our loss. I couldn't just sit idly by and watch her continue. My family had suffered enough, and I wouldn't allow Clara to continue exploiting us. One day, as I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, Clara came to the house. She still had her perfect appearance, but in my eyes, I could clearly see her calculations. She wasn't here to help my family. She was here for one thing, to exploit our suffering. "Mom, I want us to be able to resolve everything peacefully," Clara said. her voice sweet but not lacking in arrogance. Your family is going through so much difficulty. I understand that. But I think you know, Adrian and I can't continue like this. If you could help, we would be very grateful. I could no longer endure it. My patience had come to an end. Clara, I can't help you, I interrupted, my voice cold. You can't exploit my family any longer. We've lost Nathan, and I won't let you continue to hurt us. She stayed silent for a moment, then sneered, but I couldn't hear sincerity in that laugh. You don't understand anything, she said, her voice now challenging. You'll regret this. This time, I didn't back down. You have no right to exploit this family anymore, I said, each word like a declaration. You can't destroy us any further. Clara stood up, smirked lightly, and left without saying another word. Although she hadn't done anything drastic, I felt like I had just won a major battle. This wasn't just a victory over her. It was a victory over myself. I had not allowed Clara to continue destroying my family. I had protected my family, and I would continue to do so. That morning, as the sunlight filtered through the window frame, I sat at the small table in the kitchen, silently gazing out at the garden, where the leaves still held drops of early dew. A heavy feeling enveloped me, and I knew the silence in the house was not just temporary. It was the consequence of secrets that could no longer be hidden. Everything in this house, from the old walls to the old memories, seemed to speak of an undeniable truth. Our family was on the brink of collapse. I looked at my hands, the slender fingers that once gently stroked my children, that held Gabriel's hand in peaceful moments. Now, those hands seemed to do nothing but hold on to pain. I had once dreamed of a different life, a life filled with laughter, evenings spent around the hearth, where everyone felt safe and loved. But now, everything had changed. We had lost Nathan, and his death not only took his life, but it also tore apart the precious things I had tried so hard to hold on to for all of these years. For the first time in a long time, I felt that I couldn't continue living in this paralysis any longer. Time couldn't heal all wounds. That's what I had told myself for many months. But now, I understood that it was the silence that was killing us, day by day. Gabriel and I, once partners who shared a happy life, now felt like strangers living under the same roof. The silence between us was a wall that could not be crossed, could not be dismantled. I couldn't see it, couldn't feel the connection between us anymore. Every time I looked into his eyes, I only saw an endless void, and I wondered if we could ever find each other again. Adrian, my youngest son, was no longer the person I knew. It pains me to say this, but it is the truth. The son I had raised, loved, and hoped would become a strong and kind man was now nothing more than a shadow of himself. Regret and a sense of failure filled my heart. I couldn't go back to fix what had been done, but I could do something for my family. No matter what price I had to pay, I couldn't let this darkness continue. Gabriel remained silent, and in my heart, a strong urge to confront him arose, to do something to change this situation. I couldn't wait any longer. This family needed to step into the light, face the painful truths, and find a way to heal the wounds. We had lost Nathan, but if we didn't overcome this paralysis, we would lose everything. And if we couldn't save anything else, at least I wanted to preserve a bit of the values we once had. That day, I decided I had to face Gabriel. I had to. We couldn't continue living in this deadlock. I knew that if I didn't step forward, if I didn't speak up, we would only keep spinning in silence, in the ghosts of the past. But when I entered the workshop, where Gabriel was working, I felt an eerie silence in the air. The hammer striking the wood echoed, but it no longer held meaning. Gabriel stopped working, turned to look at me, and we stood there, in the simple walls of the workshop, where the things he made couldn't heal the wounds in each of our hearts. Gabriel, I spoke, my voice breaking with resolve. We can't continue living like this. We can't stay in this silence forever. You can't keep running away. He looked at me, saying nothing. Gabriel was a strong man, but now I saw him like a lost child. His eyes looked at me, but I couldn't recognize anything in them. Not love, not encouragement, not sharing, only emptiness. "What do you want me to do, Margaret?" Gabriel asked, his voice hoarse as if he had grown too tired. "I can't change anything. I couldn't save Nathan." I silently looked into his eyes, knowing that Gabriel was in as much pain as I was. But I couldn't continue to let silence reign. I couldn't continue letting him fall into this paralysis and deadlock. "I can't change the past, Gabriel," I said gently but firmly. "But we can change the future. If we do nothing, this family will be nothing but ashes." Gabriel lowered his head, his shoulders hunching as though he was trying to hide his pain. "I don't know what to do anymore, Margaret. I'm afraid. Afraid of losing both of my sons." "You've already lost Nathan, Gabriel," I said, my eyes filled with determination. "But if you continue to be afraid, you'll lose everything. You have to face the truth." For a long time, we stood there, not saying anything. Time seemed to stop in that moment of silence. Finally, Gabriel sighed, and then spoke softly. "I saw Adrian push Nathan that night. I stayed silent because I was afraid of losing both of my sons. But now, I can't live with this guilt anymore." Gabriel's confession stunned me into silence. Everything I had known about Nathan's death suddenly came to light in one moment. Gabriel, the husband I had trusted, the father of Adrian and Nathan, had witnessed the truth but stayed silent, afraid of losing his youngest son. The cost of that silence was unbearable. Now, I couldn't go back anymore. Gabriel had admitted it, and I couldn't deny what had happened. But at least we had begun to face the truth. No matter how painful it was, at least this family still had a chance to heal. We can't change the past, Gabriel, but I believe that if we face the truth, we can start over. Loss is unavoidable, but we can't live forever in this paralysis and guilt. Gabriel didn't say anything, just looked at me deeply. His eyes seemed to be searching for an escape, and I knew part of him wanted redemption. Both of us needed to do something, so we didn't have to keep living in the darkness of the past. And although we might never get back what we lost, at least we could find comfort in the moments where we face the truth. Everything will eventually pass, but the wounds will remain. I can't change the past, I can't bring Nathan back, and I can't reverse the mistakes that have happened. But I can face those pains, step through them, and continue living with the truth. My family, even though it has been torn apart, even though there are secrets that have never been spoken, at least now we can look into each other's eyes without hiding. Because life is not just about what's lost, but about what we still have. And I've learned that sometimes healing only comes when we have the courage to face the deep pains within our hearts. In those dark days, I found strength not from what I once had, but from the forgiveness I offered to those I love and to myself. Now, sitting next to Gabriel in the peaceful home we built together over the years. I realized that the truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to heal. As for you, have you ever faced the truth you've feared? Have you ever wondered if there will be a day when you'll be strong enough to forgive the mistakes of others and your own mistakes as well? Share your thoughts in the comments below this video. Don't carry the pain alone, because when we share, we are no longer alone on the journey to find peace. And if you feel that this story brings a sense of relief to your soul, don't hesitate to share it with your loved ones. Perhaps, in this story, they will find a part of themselves. We would love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Share your story, no matter how small, in the comments. Every share, every emotion can be a part of the healing process. Don't let pain hold you back for too long. Allow yourself to move forward, step by step,